For more, we can bring in France 24 international affairs commentator Armen Geogian. Armen, clearly a very emotional time for Christine Blasey Ford there. I want to talk about the stakes for both parties in that room today, the Democrats and the Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it's
a tough one.
Yeah, it was very emotional. It's hard to sort of just go away from the emotions straight away and talk about the stakes, but it's true that this is, in the sort of grand scheme of things, very important for both parties as to whether Brett Kavanaugh gets nominated or not. And the Democrats have been saying, well, if he makes it to the Supreme Court, it is going to change things, or it could, on questions such as abortion, gun control, the fact that the limits of executive power, the fact that Brett Kavanaugh has in the past defended executive power, which could have an impact on whether Donald Trump might one day be subpoenaed by the Mueller investigation. So there's a lot at stake politically here for both parties. There was still some politicking going on the committee. You could see those kind of daggers being drawn by Dianne Feinstein and Senator Grassley, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. They were both effectively accusing each other of playing politics with this very important testimony, but most of the testimony, thankfully, was really not about the politics around the case. It was mostly about her account, with, of course, the prosecutor that was hired from Arizona, who's an expert in sex crimes, sexual-related crimes, that was hired by the Republicans. So they basically had this prosecutor, Rachel Mitchell, speaking on behalf of each Republican member of the committee. Meanwhile, the Democrats individually were asking the questions, but actually they didn't have a lot of questions to ask because her testimony was so detailed. So really, the Democratic members of the committee, for them, it was an opportunity to sort of hammer home, to underscore her courage. And if one were to look at this in terms of political drama, without obviously wanting to get away from the very real human trauma that she's going through even now, as we could see. But if one did sort of take a step back for a second and looked at this as political drama, it is something that the Democratic members of that committee were sort of heightening in a sense. And that was obvious also with Dianne Feinstein's comments at the beginning, the way she couched it as, the fight of a woman who has had to overcome so much and is still going through a lot because of these death threats that she's received. Thus, she had to move out of the home and the pressure that her family has come under. So Dianne Feinstein was couching it very much in human terms. So I think there was quite a difference between the Republican Senator Grassley, the chairman, and the way the Democrats were playing this, which was clearly all on the emotional vein. Senator Grassley was much more kind of procedural, more kind of legalistic in a way. But one wonders where this is all going now, because there were a lot of calls, Delana, as you heard, for the FBI to investigate these. Yes, exactly. And Senator Grassley was saying, well, the FBI has investigated Kavanaugh, but of course that would be Democrats would say, well, that's a sort of convenient answer that sidesteps the main point, which is that these specific allegations have not been investigated by the FBI. The FBI, of course, did look into Kavanaugh's background when he was going through the process. Yeah. But since all this came to a head with the three women, they were mentioned by Dianne Feinstein. It's not just Christine Blasey Ford, but Deborah Ramirez and Julie Swetnick as well. So this has added the momentum to these calls that we just heard now for the FBI to take on the investigation. What would that do? Likely it would delay the whole process, possibly beyond the midterm elections.
And I thought it was very interesting because we had in the opening remarks Senator Feinstein, who basically read out Christine Blasey Ford's resume. You know, where she did high school, where she went to college, the 2 masters, her PhD, where she works now. I think it was very impressive. Yes, there was that procedural side from the Republicans, but the Democrats also wanted to paint her as, yes, a victim, but also someone who's not looking for fame. This is someone who's accomplished something in her life. She's working between Stanford and another university, so she's an accomplished woman here.
Yeah, there were 2 things. So the Senator Feinstein really trying to sort of up the credibility of the witness before she even started to speak, and that's also what her party colleagues on the committee then did in their 5 minutes each. As you said, the Republicans a little bit more procedural going on, and of course the questions were very prosecutorial. You know, what do you remember? What happened in this precise instance? Was the music on then? So, you know, very precise questions. The Democrats were really staying on the big overarching issues. There were references to the Me Too movement. All this was intended to have resonance with Time's Up and so forth. And of course, the backdrop of the midterms will have been in many people's minds during this testimony, and the need to win over voters who don't like this sort of thing, and who might have been turned off by the online campaign against Christine Blasey Ford. And sorry, what was the second?
Well, I was just saying,
you mentioned. Sorry, I forgot.
There's so many things to talk about. I was saying it's interesting that as this panel is underway at the Senate, you have protests taking place outside, both for and against Judge Brett Kavanaugh. So that was an interesting
Yes.
point.
Oh, sir, I know I was going to say, if we can just quickly... Yes, I mean, and she was very careful herself, Christine Blasey Ford, to underline that she was not anyone's pawn. She really does not want to be seen as a pawn in the Democrats' game to try to, push this beyond November so that they can perhaps... win back control of Senate and stop this whole thing going through. She definitely doesn't want to play that game, want to be seen in that way. And the way she portrays this is that, she was going through this whole human drama. Should I go public? Shouldn't I? She wanted to make it seem as though she was not, choosing the moment that she went public out of any sort of party political purpose.
I thought what was interesting is what she said. She was left with little choice because somehow reporters discovered where she lived. They'd show up, try and talk to her dog even. Then one reporter showed up.
A reporter went into her graduate student class and she thought that she was a graduate student. Yeah. So apparently it was an untenable position and she had to go sort of the full way. The very different way of couching it from the way Senator Grassley did, when he gave the timeline of, we asked for all these requests from Christine Blasey Ford's attorney to come forward, that there were, I don't know how many, 16 requests or something, I think it was, and they were met with, refusal. So you had a kind of very procedural, legalistic sort of portrayal of things on the one hand from Senator Grassley, and this very sort of human and obviously vulnerable account from Christine Blasey Ford herself.